Hey everyone, it's me, Dr. E, and it is just about 1 o'clock, and thank you for joining me for my shoulder pain strategies workshop. So I'm planning on going about 30 minutes or so, and I'm going to start out, might as well just get started. I'm going to start out talking a little bit about shoulder anatomy. So first off is your shoulder is a miracle. So out of all of the joints in your body, the major joints, your shoulder is unique. So I did bring my spine, not because there's a shoulder on it, but because there's a hip joint on it. And in your hip joint, your femur head fits in here. This is called your acetabulum. And your hip joint is probably the closest to your shoulder joint of all the joints in your body. And it's still not as miraculous as your shoulder is. And that is because there's this neat little cup for your femur to sit in, to stabilize it. And then you've got your gluteal and hip muscles, really massively strong muscles from us ambulating that help keep that stabilized. Well, guess what? Your shoulder does not have that. Your shoulder does have in your scapula, your shoulder blade, a little bit of an acetabulum like that, but not nearly as stable as your hip. And your muscles, your shoulder muscles, no matter how hard you work out, they're just never going to be as strong and stable as your hip muscles are. So the wonderful thing is, because it is not encapsulated by bone, you have there is no other joint in your body that has the range of motion that can go in the many, many ways that it does as your shoulder, which is a blessing and a curse, because that mobility brings with it the tendency to have instability or be susceptible to injury, especially when we don't take care of it properly. And nobody ever teaches us how to take care of it properly. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So everybody's heard of rotator cuff muscles, right? So your rotator cuff muscles actually are 4 muscles of your shoulder, and they're called your sits muscles, S-I-T-S. And your sits muscles are the supraspinatus, your infraspinatus, your teres minor, and your subscapularis. So I had the foresight, here we go, to print this backwards so it showed up correctly on Facebook Live. So here's your muscles. And all of them have different jobs. So this picture is looking at your scapula, your shoulder blade from the back, and this picture is looking at it through erasing your rib cage from the front, and that's your subscapularis. This is a big thing with shoulder pain, and we'll talk about that. Now the other picture, so back to subscapularis, is the name of the action. The primary action of the subscapularis is the internal rotation of, it says the shoulder, but actually it's your humerus. Your humerus is your upper arm bone, and everything that we do with our arms, our hands, involves our humerus being stable, being either in neutral position, being internally rotated, which means like this. So if you were to take your thumb and you would roll it down towards your belly and down, that's internal rotation. And we do way too much of that. The other action is external rotation, which is sort of like hitchhiking, not just from the wrist, but your entire arm. You rotate your arm out. Guess what? We spend most of our lives internally rotating our humerus. So remember, those 4 muscles, each one has a different action. You have, muscles that sort of help. You have your deltoids, which aren't part of the rotator cuff, but they do help lift your arm. But the sits muscles coordinate they work together to have that happen with the range of motion that it does. Externally rotating your arm, reaching behind you, and versus internal rotation, that subscapularis, is anything that you do where your hands are in front of your body. That would be sitting at a computer typing. If you are a biker, that would be riding a bike. If you're a golfer, that would be golfing. think of the activities that you do that probably involve, I mean, if they're using your arms, internal rotation of the humerus. In order for the shoulder to function optimally and for you not to have pain because of dysfunction, it's crucial that all 4 of these muscles coordinate their actions together, and also that they are all more or less equally strong. And what happens due to the lives that we lead is that we over-exercise our internal rotators because of repetitive use. Over and over and over again, we're doing that internal rotation. And we really don't. Think about your life and what you do. What do you do where you're externally rotating that arm? And because of that, it's really important for you to develop fitness strategies to balance that out, that honestly you have to do forever, because you're going to be doing this forever and you've got to do something to balance that out. Regardless of what you might have going on in your shoulder, whether it's or whether you've had a dislocation in the past, partial or complete, that definitely destabilizes your shoulder, and it makes it that much more important for you to keep all of your rotator cuff muscles strong and stable. It helps sort of suck that humerus onto your torso, your rib cage, and keep it where it's supposed to be. And when it's where it's supposed to be, it doesn't hurt. If you have arthritis, I'm going to tell you a little story about my own experience with shoulder pain. I've been a chiropractor for 30 years, and for the first 9 of those years, I lived in a little town in South Carolina where I adjusted a lot of guys that rode tractors all day long, and farm workers and industrial workers, and lots of just large people who had, a lot of them had lower back. I was a pretty intense lower back pain practice, sometimes with discs involved and that sort of thing. Well, as a chiropractor, one of the best ways and one of the tools that we have to help adjust the hips and the lower back is to be me standing on my side and pulling and pushing and doing a lot of physical work. And over the course of 30 years, what happened to my shoulder is that part of your shoulder on the top of where your clavicle and your shoulder blade meet is called your acromion. My body had built up a little bony shelf underneath that on the inside. It's common with people who play baseball and people who use extreme ranges of motion. And I had built up this little bony shelf under there that in response to that repetitive stress. And the bigger that got, my rotator cuff muscles that would pass through that channel had less space to move. And so every time I would use my arms, it would rub and it would rub. And it got to the point where I was almost unable to practice my profession because this is my dominant arm. And I tried a steroid shot finally, after trying to keep this maintained with exercise and with non over-the-counter medications or over-the-medication natural remedies for inflammation. But it was really clear, because this was a mechanical issue that was happening, that had to go away. So I had a surgery called Subacromial Decompression, where they go in under that bone, they shave it off and open up that space where those rotator cuff muscles go, because the doc was shocked actually. He said your rotator cuff tendons and muscles are in excellent shape, and I attribute that completely to yoga practice that I've had consistently in my life since 1994. Yoga is amazing for your shoulders. And so my rotator cuff muscles are actually in really good shape because that was fitness for my shoulders. It just had to have surgery to have that fixed. So since then, it has been crucial that I keep my exercise regimen for my shoulder regular. If I stop, it took me about 2 years to completely get over the discomfort from post-surgery. They take the bursa out, and sometimes the body builds one back and sometimes it doesn't. And I just, and being able to lie on my shoulder after the surgery. And so 2 years, that was 2017. So now it's been 4 years. I can honestly say that when I keep up with my exercise regimen, I can sleep on my side I can do just about anything I could do prior to the surgery. And I do have some supplements that I take as well to help with that. So this shoulder has the same thing going on, unfortunately, and I can tell. But because it's not my dominant arm, it's not as extreme as this arm was. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. I'm keeping it strong to see if I, hopefully don't go down that same path as having, general anesthesia. It's major surgery, and I would rather not put my body through that. And so I'm just going to keep an eye on it and keep it strong. So let's see. I covered my history. Shoulder joint is unique. What might be the reason behind your pain? So how do you know if it's a rotator cuff issue? Is it a tear? Is it just chronic inflammation because of repetitive trauma, which, like I said, overusing those internal rotators over and over and over again, it kind of changes the way your joint lines up, and it has a tendency then to experience repetitive micro trauma when you do use your shoulder and cause you pain or lie on your shoulder like you're going to go to sleep. If it only bothers you at night, that would also be a symptom because of that pressure. Now, how do you know? So in order to determine for sure if you have a tear in your rotator cuff, you do need an MRI, and an orthopedist or a chiropractor can refer you for that also. Orthopedists usually treat it. Orthopedists usually also want to give you NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, whether over the counter or prescribed, and they usually will try to give you a steroid shot. And I did that before my surgery. It's like, okay, don't like interventions in my body like that, but I said, you know what, before surgery I want to try everything. So I had a steroid shot in the shoulder. And I want to tell you something important about steroids is initially they're to trigger anti-inflammation, so that if you have an inflammatory situation going on, to help calm that down. However, if what you're doing is a perpetual issue, that won't help forever, because you're still doing the thing that is making the inflammation happen, and the steroid shot won't last that long. And so usually they'll try to give you another one. Well, it lasts for 3 months and they'll give you another one. Long-term repetitive steroid shots actually cause more degeneration in joints through the repetition of the application of those steroid medications. So it's not something that is going to be a repetitive thing that you can do for a long period of time. So don't do that. Some docs will try to. Don't do that. In my situation, I was really shocked because the orthopedic surgeon, he gave me the steroid shot and he said, "How does it feel?" And I immediately raised my arm, something that I couldn't do without extreme pain. Like within 10 seconds after the shot, I raised my arm up and I was like, "Oh, it's gone." I had absolutely no pain in my shoulder instantly. And I was really shocked at that response. And he's like, "Well, great. So it's inflammation. Give me a call on next week and see how it goes." Well, as the day progressed, hour after hour, my shoulder pain came back. And it got stronger and stronger, and until it was actually worse. I couldn't even sleep that night because I had such pain in my shoulder. Though that gets me, he didn't tell me this might happen. And so I'm on the internet and I find out a couple of interesting things. That fluid for the steroid injection has an anesthetic in it, which completely and instantly numbs your sensory nerves, so it can't feel anything. And when my shoulder had instantly felt better, nothing works that fast. It's just even things that work, they don't work instantly. And I was just like, wow, that's really surprising. That's why it wasn't an instant anti-inflammatory, because instant anti-inflammation is not a thing. It takes time for inflammation to go away. But an anesthetic completely numbed those pain receptors, so I was unable to feel anything aggravating that inflammation. So that's why it felt better after the shot, and he hadn't told me that. And number two is there's such a thing as steroid flare. And I did not know this until I found my next orthopedic surgeon, who is not that guy, who I went a few months later, okay, try another guy, get some good references, and I explained to him about how the day of the shot, as it went on, my shoulder became excruciating. And he was like, oh yeah, you had a steroid flare. And I'm like, that's a thing? I had no idea there was such a thing as a steroid flare. And he said, some people get that. And I Googled it, and actually there's not a lot of information on the internet. You can Google anything and find a million entries. Well, there's not a lot on steroid flares. And what I did find is that it's actually pretty common for that to happen. So I find it kind of shocking that docs don't explain that might be a possible result from getting your shot that day. So that's my thought on steroid flares. So steroids, not a solution for my shoulder. Surgery was because I did yoga and weight training all the way up to my surgery, which actually it wasn't so much the yoga and weight training that bothered my shoulder. It was working because guess what? Internal rotation. When I adjusted necks, when I adjusted backs, it was just over and over and over again. And when I was doing yoga and weight training and strength training of anything, was concentrating on external rotation. I used kinesio tape to tape my shoulder back in that externally rotated position to get me as long as I did. But eventually it was definitely do surgery. So had the surgery. I recovered. In 6 weeks, they released me because I was still healing. But as far as getting through the PT, always do your PT. If you have shoulder surgery or any surgery, if you've got PT, do it. Because my muscles were so strong from keeping it stable as long as I could, that my recovery was very fast. And my range of motion, I gained that. I kept working with that with, again, exercises. I'm going to do them at the end because I'm wired up here, and if I start moving around too much, I know everything is going to go flying. So, but all this background hopefully is helpful for you if you've had a trauma, or it's like, most often people say, well, I don't know what I did. Sometimes you did have a trauma that tore something or yanked something. But very frequently people will say, I don't know what started this. It just came on and got worse and worse and worse. And I sit at a desk. I don't do anything physical. Why is my shoulder hurting, and how can I make it go away? You have to work to make it go away. How do you know? It's internal humerus rotation, because I would hazard that about 90% of shoulder pain issues out there have to do with this imbalance in those sits muscles. You're 90% developed in that internal rotation in your humerus, and the other poor little sits muscles that do the other thing are just puny little, we just don't work on them, and that's what we're going to work on. How can you tell? If you're standing at a resting state, so close your eyes, stand in front of a mirror, flap your arms around, and then and try not to guide it, but see where your arms fall when you're resting. So you can see mine are pretty much, my hands are flat against my thighs, not because I was shooting to do that, but that's where they hang, because I have healthy external rotators to balance out those internal rotators. If you have overdeveloped internal rotators in your humerus, which is often paired with, if you lift weights, internal overdevelopment of your pec muscles, your pec, with bench presses. A lot of guys who weight lift will bench press because they like to get developed pecs, because they like the way that it looks. And what ends up happening is, as you strengthen that pec and your internal rotators get overdeveloped, your arm starts to roll forward. So if you walk around gyms with these bodybuilders, you'll see they walk around, I call it like it's a gorilla stance, where their hands are facing forward as their resting position. If that is you have overdeveloped internal rotation of your humerus, and you need to work on balancing that out with your external rotation. The exercise is at the end of this. If you do yoga, I am a huge fan of yoga. Mountain pose is pretty much the same thing. If you find you're in mountain pose, or if you're a teacher and you see people with that rotation going this way, they have got to work on their external rotators. So see what you can work into your routine to help your people do that. One other yoga pose is downward facing dog. A lot of times when people have those overdeveloped internal rotators, if you're not familiar with downward facing dog, is you start out on your hands and knees, and then on your toes you pike your hips up and your arms are outstretched and holding you up. If you have overdeveloped internal rotators, your elbows will be pointing to the side. So your arms are straight, and in a proper downward facing dog, if you bent your elbows, they would come to your body. If you have internal rotation of your humerus, your arms now, your hands are like this. If you bent your elbows, they would go out to the side. So that is another indicator that you need to work on those rotators. And that's actually in that position to hold downward facing dog, and getting in a yoga position, in case you didn't know, getting into the yoga position is only half the work. Once you're in the position, then you need to work in the position. That's what I call the magic of yoga, is once you're there, you rotate your torso, you extend your spine. And in this case, in downward facing dog, is you think about your arms are here, you're supporting your body, and you're rotating, feel it all the way up to your shoulder, rotating that humerus out. As you can tell, I'm a huge yoga fan. All right. No matter what is going on with your shoulders, if you've been diagnosed with arthritis, which would be just degeneration to some extent of the bones here, which really isn't as common as you might have in your lumbar spine and your vertebra, for example. If you have rotator cuff issues, if you have a former injury like a dislocation, it's even more important that you do these exercises. And if you have not been exercising those external rotators for like forever, it may be uncomfortable at the beginning because they're not used to working. And if you repeat exercises for, I would say 2 to 3 weeks, you should start noticing a huge difference. So don't exercise your internal rotators. So don't be focusing on bench presses and that sort of thing. We're going to be working on other stuff. All right. Surgery, I covered steroid shots, supplements. I do take a supplement that has, let me see, it's got frankincense, calcium, turmeric, black pepper, collagen, glucosamine, hyaluronic acid, wintergreen, clove, and black spruce. It's called Agiles. It's from Young Living. I take that not every day. When I was getting over things, I was taking it every day. All of those have an anti-inflammatory, build your cartilage, healthy action on your body. And when I am in a phase where I have shoulder pain, it's enormously helpful. Supplements and over-the-counter medication will not take the place of you just doing this work. So let's see. Anesthetic, steroid flare, weighted bar. Okay, I'm going to show you a few of my tools. Let's see how much I can do before I have to unplug over here. So I brought a few therabands with me. This one is tied to a chair because I want a demo. But if you ever notice, therabands come in different colors, and they are different colors because they're different densities. So you need a different amount of strength to use them. And again, all right, so I probably need to put a disclaimer in here. If you're not my patient and I haven't evaluated you and you're just watching this video, you need to get evaluated by somebody, by a chiropractor, by an orthopedist. Just make sure, tell them what you want to do. They'll probably help you. They may send you to PT. If it's an orthopedist, they may send you to a PT to make sure you're doing things properly in the first place. Form, as in anything, is very important. So this black one here is very strong. You can get a really good workout of all parts of your body with Therabands. This is called Theraband. Theraband, it's a special one. It's called CLX. Theraband, flip over, here we go. CLX. This TheraBand is neat because it's a double layer and it has loops in it. So instead of having to grab something and hold on to it just like this and pull, you can put your hand through and have your hand open, and it makes it a little bit easier to use. And they have some great exercises on the Theraband YouTube page for the CLX ones. And Lindsay Logan, who's the skier, she does a bunch of them for them, and you can do ones where you're standing on it and lifting and all sorts of things. So, with that disclaimer said, here's a TheraBand. I have it tied to a chair right now. You can also tie a knot in the end of it, like I did with this one. Don't have to do anything fancy. Find a door, close it in the door with the knot on the other side, and there you go. You've got resistance. You don't have to run around the house looking for something stable to tie this thing on, because if it's not heavy enough, you'll end up pulling whatever that thing is across the room. So this can go in a door with the knot on the other side. Now with that TheraBand is, with your arm out, here we go, is you're going to think about hitchhiking, which is externally rotating against resistance. External, 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 and hold. And I can feel stuff working. You will be able to feel stuff working. And start out with fewer reps, maybe 5, 8 reps with a lightweight band. You can also often get the Therabands in sets of graduating intensities. As you get stronger, bump it up. If you're not working hard, you're not going to get stronger. So this isn't supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be excruciating, but it has to be somewhere in between where you're honestly working. So, well, there you go. This is an old Theraband. I love live video. So the point is, you've got hitchhiking. I like it because that is the external rotation, and not just your forearm externally rotating, your entire upper arm up and back, and hold it there. And do that for 5 minutes or so. All right, some other exercises that there's lots of YouTube videos that talk about stuff like that, but because I developed a protocol for my own shoulders that I figured out to keep me healthy, and it was just through trial and error. And that involves a weight ball. So this is a 10-pound weight ball. Which is kind of built up to it, so you may want to do a 5-pound. 8 pound, don't start with 10 if you're not used to doing that. And I actually think about your shoulder being a miracle. I guess that is backwards, isn't it? So your shoulder is a miracle. We spend so much of our time in this one limited window of the entire range of motion of our shoulder. And when you work, it's having all 4 muscles, those sits muscles and tendons, work in tandem together collaboratively means you need to do stuff everywhere because they all kick in, and their collaboration and balance, they have memory, just like repeating a karate move or repeating a yoga move, or certain things, you do it over and over again. You need them to remember how to work together. So I love a ball because you can do all kinds of, just move them. Just don't bench press them because you already do too much of that. So I like to do sort of a squat routine where I reach one direction, up, and squat, touchdown. 1, 2, 3, down. 1, 2, 3, down. So I will, and then you get a good squat in there too. So I will do about 3 sets of those, about 12 times. You get a little aerobic workout also, but you're adding more ranges. You're expanding that range of use for your shoulders, which keeps them healthy. All right, another tool I bought. So the YMCA where I used to work out had these great weighted bars. And this bar is 15 pounds. And you might want to start out with a little bit less. This is not for like free weights, a metal one. This has rubber padding and soft ends. And a weight bar is great. So I'm over my head. And again, think about just doing stuff that challenges your shoulders in directions that you usually, especially behind the head, anything back. I also, there you go, backwards. Doesn't have to be fancy, they just have to be working together. I also use this on a workout bench on my back. Again, not so much to bench press, but once it's up, I drop all the way back as far as I can and slowly lift up. So over my head. Now I'm standing now. So imagine you're on your back and this is in front, this is over your head. You let it down slowly as far as is comfortable. Maybe wiggle it around there too. While it's over your head, use those. God, it feels so good. I haven't done these in a few days, and when I don't, I really can feel it. And then slowly bring it over your head again. All right, so how far have we gone? I think I'm done. So if you're here in Arlington, come in, get assessed. When I see patients in my office for whatever they've got going on, whether it's their neck or their lower back or their shoulders, is you're here for adjustments, because it's also important that your spine is lined up and everything's functioning optimally and you don't have fixations with your joints, because if you've been limping along with shoulder pain for a long time, you often have been guarding, doing certain things, which creates a lot of tension and locked up joints in your upper back. So you need to get that taken care of. But while we're doing that, we'll set up a strategy for you to, if you've got shoulder pain, to take care of it with your own exercises, line you up. I'm going to put links to some of these devices in the discussion in this event thread, and then reach out to me if you have any other questions. So I hope that was helpful. Don't forget, take care of your shoulder forever and the rest of your body, because it's a miracle that it does what it does, and it will keep doing what it does as long as you take care of it. All right, bye-bye. It's me, Dr. E.